Good morning, Chloe. Nice to see you.
Good morning. Thank you for
Oh,
having me.
so glad you could join us today. Thank you so much. You have such an interesting research path and so many great interests. Maybe we can start by just having you introduce yourself and say where you are right now and what you're doing for work.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Chloé Barron. I am currently a postdoctoral fellow at Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard University. And in the lab that I'm in at, I focus on studying blood stem cells in leukemia in zebrafish. So I actually do cancer stem cell research in what I think is the coolest model organism out there, which are zebrafish.
Yeah, I think it would be a surprise to most people that you could do cancer research in a fish, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And besides just the very cool system that you're working in, is there something about your work that is really makes you excited every day to go in?
I mean, only one thing. I think that's hard to pick, but I just find again, and I'm happy to talk a little bit further about the zebrafish, but I just feel like it's such a cool model that you can use in endless ways. And my favorite part that literally gets me every day to the lab doing my experiments is to work with those embryos. In just a couple days in the lab under the microscope, you can see the development of one single cell. And just in under 2 days, you can watch every single cell divide, every single tissue form, every single organ happen right in front of your eyes. And in just under 2 days, you have an organism. And just like that, you can use many, many different methods, also in the context of cancer, but also in healthy development. And try to ask any kind of question that you'd like to answer. And honestly, just I guess my answer then is kind of the endless possibilities
Yeah.
that brings is really what get me to work in the morning.
Yeah, boy, biology is incredible, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
it's weird and fascinating and beautiful. And yes, as you say, it holds endless possibilities for asking incredibly important questions and cool questions in ways that give you real great answers. So that's terrific. Now, so you said you were a postdoc. I'm not sure that everybody might know
Yeah.
exactly what a postdoc is or does. Do you want to explain a little bit about your training up to this point and what your
Yeah,
postdoc is intended
absolutely.
to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, being a postdoc actually refers to the stage in my career as a scientist that I'm at. And postdoc, actually, postdoctoral researcher means after the doctorate. So, that just means that my previous stage was getting a doctorate or PhD in biology. And to get to that point, I actually took a little bit of a different path than all the American students that will watch this because I was actually born and raised and I did all my studies in France. So in France, the system is slightly different, but in the end, it's also a little bit similar. Once I graduated high school, I went to university and did a bachelor in life science, which takes 3 years. And then after this, I did a master's in molecular and cellular biology, which takes 2 years. And this 3 + 2 years, bachelor plus master, is what is required in France, actually in Europe in general, to enter a graduate program and then become a PhD candidate. And at the end of that, obtain a PhD. So I actually didn't do my PhD in France, even though I did my bachelor and my master's in France. I actually moved to the Netherlands, which it's not very, very far. You can drive from France to the Netherlands as quickly as you can drive from Boston to New York. So it's very, very close. But in the Netherlands, I went to Utrecht University, where I spent about 5 years, and I got a PhD in cancer, stem cell, and developmental biology. And so I always like to refer at the end of my PhD to when I finished school, been there, done that a while. I'm really done with that. And I feel like a researcher at the end of their PhD is kind of done with their training. And that's what you kind of are as a postdoctoral researcher. You're kind of being done with school. You've done that for a while. You know now what it means and what it takes to be a researcher. And that you're joining a lab as a postdoctoral fellow, and you kind of are more on your own. You're doing research on your own within a lab structure, which is actually the last step before you usually decide to become your own principal investigator, therefore leading your own lab. So basically, I'm just, following all the academic step one at a time. But the postdoc is what feels now like the beginning of independence after study.
Yeah. It's a surprisingly long path, but interesting. And as you say, there's just a lot of training along the way, and now a transition to more independence, but under, an umbrella of a established research lab. And so maybe looking ahead, do you have hopes of starting your own research lab somewhere?
Yeah, I do. I think that that's kind of the dream for a lot of people. I'm definitely considering that option. I think I've been a postdoc now for just 2 years, and research projects, especially when using a model organism and studying cancer, take you often, I think, 4 to 5 years. So I definitely still want to be a postdoc for a few more years. And I feel like, again, like I said, this postdoc time is really when you become independent and when you start to realize what it actually takes to lead a research project or even multiple research projects. Also, explore other things like mentoring students, mentoring other grad students, learning all that is necessary to know and enjoy aside from the science. Because if I decide to have my own lab, yes, I'm going to have to do science, but I'm also going to have to take care of a team. I'm going to have to mentor them, spend time with them, and also write grants to obtain funding for the lab. Teach also, which is something that I love to do as well. So I feel like these years as a postdoctoral fellow is really the time to explore all those things. And, I would love to start my own lab, but I'm also still exploring what that means to learn all those skills and also find out if I like that. I think it's a really important thing in career, like exploration, but also decision when the time is there. Do I actually like doing what I'm about to commit to?
Yeah. Well, as I listen to your day-to-day and your hopes going forward, it's a wonderful thing that you like going in every day and enjoy your work, because there is so much to learn and so much growth that keeps happening. And it's, it is unsettling and it is exploratory to figure out, do I like this? Am I good at that? How will I approach this? So to have that growth mindset and the open-heartedness to new learning and new experiences, I think that can make what sounds like a very long training period actually still feel very satisfying, and as if you're on track, not that you're stalled, but that you're on track towards something. So
yeah, and I think if I can jump on that, because I really love this angle that you took, is that and probably hearing about all the years I spent in school and all that it means to actually become a researcher, it can feel like a gigantic mountain to climb, and that, the reaching satisfaction and reaching achievement is only when you reach the top of the mountain, but actually not. I really find, my bachelor, then master's, then PhD, and now postdoc, it's not just one gigantic mountain that you'll be successful and you've reached once you've finished all that, but there are so many intermediate points where you're like, I did that, I accomplished that, what a rewarding thing I'm doing. And I really want to emphasize this, because I feel like a lot of young students are like, oh my God, I don't want to spend 10 years in school. That's horrible. Who wants to do this? It actually, even though that's, in the end what we did, it doesn't feel like that's what's happening, because every step of your curriculum is different. There is time in the classroom, there is time in the lab, there is time so it's really, really variable, and you become so invested in your own research that it doesn't feel like work for most of your PhD. And so I really think this reward system that happens and all these levels of satisfactions along the way make everything better. Yeah, thank you for pointing that.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to ask you if knowing what you know now, would you have started on this long and challenging but satisfying journey back when you started? And I think you have answered that. So yeah. Maybe instead I'll ask you, when did you decide you were really interested in science and that this was something you were going to pursue professionally?
I think it's so actually, I said that I did a bachelor and a master. I kind of lied a little bit by omission. I actually sneaked in a year of medical school, because actually when I graduated high school, I come from a family of doctors. And I was like, maybe that's also what I'm supposed to do. And after a year of medical school, I was like, That's not for me. I am not the kind of student that wants to or actually enjoy learning whole books by heart, and really spending all this time really was this very in the book kind of style of studying. And I was really someone that needed puzzles. And I really have this vivid memory of me as a young child. I was also like wanting to fix puzzle, wanting to think about thing and be like, hey, how about we do this instead, rather than learning about, how bones are called and how they link to each other. You can't do anything about that. You have to just learn that. And I felt that was very frustrating for me. And even though I've loved science always from a very young age, and my year in medical school was filled with science, so I definitely loved that. But then directly I started to realize that I needed something more, was more freedom, was more investigation, was more unknown, and was more, I think, what is excitement for me. And so from there, I branched out from medical school to a bachelor in biology, which, when I was in my bachelor, I had no clue I would be doing what I am doing today, but at least I felt in the right space to learn the things that later on will bring me eventually to where I'm at now. And then I kind of, followed the track, but also bent the track to my needs. So kind of, looking for the master program that would fit my growing interest in stem cells, and also actually following a personal desire to study blood by having known people, unfortunately, that have suffered through blood cancer. So this was also a personal wish that I had. And so, molding all these desires and also experiences that I had in my own life, I kind of, follow what was there and bending it to what I wanted. And it felt like, so basically, I don't think I can really answer your question, because it feels like kind of always wanted that, but also it just happens as you go. And I think for students, there's often, what do you want to do when you grow up? Which should be a question that once, I want to be an anesthesiologist, like pediatric anesthesiologist. Nobody really knows that. And I think this is something to realize that that's okay, because nobody as 16 or 17-year-old, I knew nothing at 16 and 17 years old. I didn't know what I wanted to become, but I knew one thing: I like science. And then I tried something, wasn't for me, but then I branched out and built upon that. And there I am.
Yeah, what a wonderful story, because I think it is incredibly powerful to be able to step back and say, what I am doing right now feels like the right thing or doesn't feel like the right thing. And to know that there is a path to either take what you're doing that feels great and seems right for you and move in a more positive direction, or decide that you're walking down the wrong road and it's time to turn around and walk in a different direction.
It's totally okay. And sometimes, these years where you're like, maybe that was a mistake, that was not for me, and it feels like the end of the world. If you kind of waste a year, first, it's not wasted. You've learned during that time, but also it's only a year. Imagine if because of that year, you would end up choosing a career that you're going to hate for 50 years, you're going to have to do it. What a terrible thing that would be. So use all that one learns during the process to actually guide the process itself.
I think that sounds amazing. Yeah, not every day is a joyful, perfect day, but you kind of know when you're in the right spot and when you're not in the right spot. So, wow, what an amazing story. And so on top of all that, I know you have additional interests beyond the bench and science, and that is with teaching. You are a wonderful and dedicated teacher. Can you say a little bit about what kind of teaching you're doing and what you like about it?
Yeah, so I feel like teaching is part of my daily life in the lab, because working in the lab is highly collaborative. And I work in a lab with more than 30 people, and we all are at different stages of our career. So remember when I was talking about students, undergrads, and also grad students, and then postdocs, and then technicians that assist us along the way, animal welfare, people that take care of our animals. And on a daily basis, there is an opportunity to teach someone about something that you learn on your own path, that what I was just describing. So I feel like that, that is part of the work, but that is, I think, I'm very actually passionate to devote some time to that part of the work, because not only I really like teaching something to someone, I also love learning something back from that person. And I think it's when there is this collaborative dynamic and this exchange and this communication with people within the lab that you can actually learn and teach all these things. But then, of course, since I moved to Boston, Boston is kind of the mecca of science and education. There's so many opportunity. And I come from Utrecht University in the Netherlands, which is actually pretty small compared to it. So when I moved here, I very quickly was introduced and got familiar with many, many teaching opportunities. So I volunteer for some organizations where I go into classrooms. Well, I used to go, now it's more virtual, but we make the best out of that. And we teach students, middle schoolers and high schoolers, about how we use zebrafish, our favorite model organism, to study blood and also skin cancer. So within just an hour of a class, we can actually bring the zebrafish to the classroom to show our model organism and explain how we can modify their DNA to study what happens to the cancer cells and how cancer arises in those organisms. And the last thing that I'm actually love the most and the most proud of is that in the lab that I'm in at, which is led by Dr. Leonard Zahn, with a colleague of mine, we have created a summer program for high school students. So for 2 weeks, we have high school students. So before it was in person, but now it is virtual. We have actually managed to expand it and even make it better with the virtual format. So we have 30 students, which we actually pay every summer part-time. So this is a paid opportunity for the students to come in and literally do their own research project in zebrafish. So the students design their hypothesis. I and colleagues, we perform the experiments for them live on Zoom. And then they analyze the data, they conclude on the data, and they present their research. And we have built this program, which we really, really are in love with, because we get to interact with wonderful students. We welcome anybody without any research experience. We want this program to be your students' first basically welcome into the research environment. And I just love planning this camp throughout the year and teaching it in the summer. It's wonderful.
That is a life-changing experience that you are offering for those students. I know that had I not had a research experience as a high school student, I am not sure I would have pursued the, college work, graduate work, postdoc work to become a PhD in science, to actually do science and to experience the reality of it is so powerful. I've often said, I don't know why we hide the most exciting
I never had I had no clue what was happening in a research lab until my third year of bachelor.
Right.
And I felt like that was so late, because I still find my way through this track, but I would have been actually so much more excited and certain about it if I would have been exposed to it earlier. So I do think being exposed is really an important thing, which I'm so happy to deliver to students every year.
Well, I am sure they are delighted to have the opportunity. So before we close out, do you want to say if a student was interested in finding more information about that program, is there a place that they could go?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you just Google Camp Zahn, Z-O-N on Google, you will find our lab website, the Zahn Lab at Boston Children's Hospital, and you will see all the details about the camp. And you can also, I'm happy to leave the link and also my contact info to you. So if any students interested, they can reach out, and I'm happy to touch base on that with any interested students.
Oh, you are a force of nature and doing so much good in your research and through your teaching. And I really appreciate your taking some time to talk with me today to share the highs and the intricacies and the opportunities that you're bringing. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to chat.